Only a few more videos in this series. We are getting so close to my number one.
Well, there's an electricity in the air, folks. A palpable hue of anticipation.
Hello Brew Crew and welcome back to my top 100. This week I'm going through my numbers 30 to 21. I don't want to spoil too much, but my highest ranked games from 2023 are coming up in this video, so let's get started.
30.
Number 30 is Ra. This game has been around for a long time at this point, but I was just introduced to it a couple of years ago at Origins, and it really grabbed me. I love games with simple rules and depth of strategy, and I think Ra definitely has that. This is an auction game by the master of auction games, Reiner Knizia, and like he tends to do, there are some cool twists on the bidding in this game. Auctions are triggered in one of two ways. Either someone will call for an auction, or once a certain number of Ra tiles come out, an auction is automatically triggered. So you might want to wait for just the right tiles to come out to call the auction, but wait too long and you leave it up to fate. The benefit of being the one to call the auction is that this is a once around the table style auction, and whoever calls the auction gets to bid last, giving them an advantage. The other really cool twist here is that there are 16 bidding tokens, numbered 1 to 16. Each player starts with 3, and 1 is placed on the main board. When it's your turn to bid, you'll declare which of your bidding tokens you're bidding with. There's no making change or anything, you just say, I'm using this value token. If you win, you exchange the token you bid with a token on the main board and then flip it face down so you can't use it for the rest of the round. So maybe you want to bid on the lot of tiles out there, but the bidding token is a 1, and you know that the next round will be a little rough for you. Such a simple idea that adds some amazing brain strain to the game. Now, the first time I played this, I played the old school Z-Man version, but we've since picked up the cool new reprint from 25th Century Games, which is a little over the top for what the game is, but also really hard to pass up.
29.
Number 29 is a monster of a game, and that's Star Wars Rebellion. This game is definitely epic. It takes up a ton of space, and at least in our game of it, it takes a lot of time. It's often described as Star Wars in a box, and I think that's pretty accurate. Basically, one side plays as the Rebels, and the other side plays as the Empire. The Empire is searching across a map of the galaxy, trying to figure out where the hidden Rebel base is, and the Rebels are trying to complete missions while keeping the location of their base a secret. Each side has different units they can deploy and different leaders they can send out to help with certain tasks. Admittedly, this is a game that won't get played often, but it's also the type of game that I love because of the story that's told over the course of the game, rather than the mechanics. This is the type of game where we set aside a day and make an event out of it. And if I'm playing a thematic game, that's exactly what I want. I want to get caught up in the story of the game, even if it takes all day for the story to reach a satisfying conclusion, and I'm 100% okay with that. The thing is, I'm not even that big of a Star Wars fan.
Let the hate flow through you.
Don't get me wrong, I loved the original trilogy, and I don't even mind some of the newer movies, but I've got friends who know all of the names of all of the races and all of the planets, and characters that appear for even 1 second in a Star Wars movie. They're fun, they're entertaining, and I enjoy them, but they aren't my favorite IP. We'll get to that eventually. But even so, playing this game makes me feel like I'm a part of that story. Actually, I wonder if being a Star Wars superfan would actually hurt the feeling of immersion. But regardless, I think it's a great game and worth the effort.
28.
Number 28 is Distilled, the first 2023 game on this section of the list. This probably won't come as a big surprise to anyone who has seen my Best of 2023 video, which I will link in the comments. In that video, I described Distilled as being expertly crafted, and I think that's pretty accurate as a description of the amount of care that went into matching the theme and the mechanisms of this game. In it, you're going to be collecting ingredients needed to make one of several spirits on your tasting flight, which will be different from game to game. And when you get ready to distill, you will gather up the ingredients, and for each type of sugar in your stack of ingredient cards, you'll add an alcohol card as well. Then you'll take all of these cards and shuffle them up and remove the top and the bottom card from the stack. This represents the two cut points of making distilled spirits, the heads and tails, or the foreshot and the feints. Distillers are after the heart of the spirit and need to make the right cuts to make the best spirit. This is such a clever approach to the way the mechanisms work in this game. It forces you to make decisions. Do I want everything I need to ensure that I make the kind of alcohol that I want, or do I risk it and hope for the best? You might get lucky, or you may have just made another bottle of moonshine. And don't get me wrong, I like a little moonshine every now and then. Depending on your character that you chose at the start of the game, you'll also have a signature spirit that only you can craft as well. You can combine different characters and tasting flight recipe cards to get different variations on gameplay. Maybe you have a game that focuses on aged spirits, or maybe you're focusing on spirits from a specific region. There are so many things I love about it, and I find it a very cozy game with the fireplace going and a glass of the good stuff.
27.
My number 27 is Rajas of the Ganges. I'm pretty certain I've said it before, but I love a dice worker placement mechanism, and this is one of my favorites, obviously. Although, I guess you're not technically placing out the dice, but you are placing workers and spending dice. Worker, placey, dicey, spendy, whatever you want to call it, it's great. This is the first game that I ever played with the overlapping score tracks. You're trying to gain wealth and fame, each represented by a different track that moves around the board in opposite directions. The end of the game is triggered when a player's point markers meet or pass each other on these tracks, and whoever meets or overlaps by the most is the winner. That was such an amazing concept when I first heard about it, and put the game immediately on my want-to-play list. Even since then, I've only played one other game, Ark Nova, that uses this idea. And to move up these different tracks, you're going to be manipulating your pool of dice to get the right colors and numbers to send your workers to specific spaces, and moving your ship down the river, building up your estate, selling goods. You'll also be trying to connect roads from your palace to the outer edges of your estate board to get the bonuses printed around the outside. I love that they went with a less Eurocentric theme for this game. Don't get me wrong, I've got a lot of those on this list too, but it's always cool to see something different. Plus, the game is so colorful, between the box and board art and all of the translucent dice. Fun, beautiful, and great gameplay.
26.
Speaking of dicey worker placey, my number 26 is Voyages of Marco Polo. And I actually include Marco Polo 2 here as well. I've played them both, and they feel very similar. I do like the fact that Marco Polo 2 makes travel a little easier, but other than that, these two are pretty much neck and neck for me, and since they're so similar, I'm just counting them as one entry.
You don't like it? Sue me!
This is a game that I had heard about since my early days of gaming, and I was so intrigued by the description of the different player powers. Each player gets a character that gives them a special power for the game, but these powers are super powerful. They're all broken, but because they're all broken, none of them are broken. Somehow it works. I got to imagine this must have taken a lot of work to get right. In this game, you're moving across a map and setting up trading posts in different cities as you make your way to Beijing. You'll also be gathering goods to fulfill contract cards that will earn you points. You'll need to collect money and camels to be able to travel along the different routes, and you'll use your dice in different numbers and quantity combinations to do this. So what you roll at the beginning of the round is super important. And as an example of the player character powers that I'm talking about, there's a character which tells you that you don't have to roll the dice. You just set them to whatever you want, which sounded ridiculous the first time I heard it. But then I saw everyone else's powers and thought the same thing about each of them. And the game ended up being very close. And it feels good to have that kind of power in a game too. It just makes it super fun to play.
25.
Number 25 is Smartphone Inc. And I actually think that this one wouldn't have made it this high up my top 100 without the Update 1.1 expansion. I play a lot of games at 2 and 3 players, which wasn't ideal for the original board, but the 1.1 expansion added a specific 2 and 3 player board, which really fixed that one complaint that I had about the game. Other than that, I think this is such a cleverly designed game. We play as different cell phone manufacturers trying to turn the biggest profit. And the way we're going to do that is by taking tiles, some that we start with and some that we'll collect throughout the game, that represent your tablet with different apps, and overlapping them in such a way that the number of a particular app symbol showing determines if and at what strength you'll be able to take an action. You're going to do this secretly and simultaneously behind a screen and then reveal. Then you take your actions like developing new technologies, opening new offices, and setting prices. This price setting mechanism is one of my favorite things about this game. See, at the end of each round, players will sell off the phones that they've made. Some customers will only pay up to a certain amount, and some want specific features on their phones. But the company that set the cheapest price for their phones will get to act first. So by the time it gets to the higher priced phone companies, there may not be any customers left to sell to. So you'll want to make sure you can offer something that the other companies can't. This is such a clever and thematic mechanism, in my opinion. This was also the first game that I played from Ivan Lashin, who then put out Furnace, which was already on this list. And we've recently picked up Mobile Markets to try too, but now he's got my attention whenever he announces a new game.
24.
Number 24 is Notre Dame. Yep, another Stefan Feld game.
You don't like it? Sue me.
This was a drafting game before drafting games were cool. Like a lot of drafting games too, this one is quick and elegant. You'll draft cards that will allow you to place influence cubes out on a map of Paris. And then you can take an action with the strength being based on the number of cubes in that section of the city. You'll get more cubes and more money, and you'll also be moving your carriage around the city to pick up bonus tokens. You'll also get points for putting cubes on Notre Dame and spending 1 to 3 coins, representing your donations to the cathedral. You will have to be careful though, because you also have to manage your rat population. If it gets out of control, the plague breaks out in your section of the city, and you'll start to lose points and influence cubes. It can be pretty punishing, which I typically don't like, but I think because this one plays really quick, it doesn't bother me as much. I'm not spending too long getting beat down. It's not as bad as In the Year of the Dragon. That game is all beat down, and it's one of the few Feld games that I did not enjoy. I do, however, like a lot of drafting games, but this is by far my favorite. I think that's because I have a similar feeling about this as I do about deck building as a mechanism. I like drafting and deck building, but I prefer games that use these mechanisms as part of a larger game rather than being the entire game itself.
23.
My number 23 is my second game that was released last year and was my game of the year for 2023, and that's Darwin's Journey. When I originally reviewed this game, I already knew that it was going to end up in my top 100. I just wasn't sure where. But after several more plays, I am not surprised that it landed here. This was a game that I had kickstarted and had to wait for what felt like forever. But when I got it, I was not disappointed. The production in the collector's edition is wonderful. There is a fair bit of iconography you need to learn, but it's not difficult and it doesn't take long to make sense. And there's a ton of stuff for you to do in this game. You're going to sail alongside the HMS Beagle, trying not to fall too far behind, because if you do, it will start to affect the amount of points that you can earn from your discoveries. You're going to explore the islands and the surrounding seas, collecting specimens and sending them back to the museums to earn money and make contributions to the theory of evolution. You'll do this through a fairly restrictive worker placement mechanism. Plus, if you want to take some of the more powerful actions, you'll need to educate your workers, represented by these wax seals that show the different types of knowledge that they've acquired. This worker progression system is great and one of the big highlights of the game for me. I have yet to play with the Fireland expansion, but I have heard that that expansion is very good as well, so I'm definitely excited to get it back to the table, which I don't think will be too hard to talk anyone into.
22,
Number 22 on this list is Grand Austria Hotel. And here's the thing. I suck at this game, but I still love it. This is Jen's game for sure, and she consistently whoops me at it. But it's so good. This was one of the first dice drafting action selection games that we played, and still one of my favorites. You are helping to run the Grand Austria Hotel, and you're going to be serving guests food and drinks. And if you serve them what they asked for, they'll stay in your hotel, because I guess that's how that works. You'll be taking actions by drafting a die from a pool that is rolled at the beginning of the round and separated by number into different action spaces. The number determines the type of action you'll take, and the number of dice in that space determines how many times you can do that action. You'll use these actions to make food, prepare rooms, and gain money. You'll also be hiring staff that will help you with all of these actions. But just to throw a wrench into the works, because apparently I like that kind of thing, you'll also have to spend time influencing the Emperor. If you're too far back on the Emperor track, at the end of the round, you'll receive some sort of punishment. Move far enough ahead, though, and you'll be rewarded. This is going to get harder and harder to do each round, though. You're going to gain points by putting guests up in rooms and completing objectives on cards randomly chosen at the beginning of the game. I understand this game. I just don't understand how to play it well, I guess. But I think it's a brilliant game and one that I'm always excited to lose.
21,
And my last game for this week is my number 21, Scythe. There have been several Stonemaier games on my top 100, but Scythe is my favorite. This is a fantastic resource management game masquerading as a Troops on the Map style game. The art is intriguing, and I love the world building that was done in this game. It's an alternate history post-World War I setting with giant mechs and other strange technology. In the center of the map is the mysterious factory, and you'll be able to, if you're able to get there, you'll get some pretty impressive upgrades. But really a large portion of what you're going to be doing is producing goods and using those goods to build buildings and mechs and to make upgrades to your workforce and actions. You're trying to complete tasks, which will let you put stars out on the board, and once a player has put their 6th star, the game ends immediately. Combat isn't required or even necessarily encouraged, although It is the one action that you can put out a star twice for. But Scythe is also a popularity contest, and if you displace workers during combat, you'll lose popularity, which can affect the multiplier that you'll get for the different things that you'll score points for at the end of the game. I think this is also one of my most tricked out games. We have the neoprene mat, the metal coins, the upgraded resource, the first 2 expansions, and the legendary box. I've not played the Rise of Fenris campaign, which I keep hearing is amazing, and I suppose I probably should try it at some point, but I honestly get a little turned off by the idea of campaign games at this point. I just have so many that are still unplayed. But even without Fenris, I think Scythe is an amazing game that I love and love to play and tinker with the different strategies. Okay, folks, that's it for this week's list. Only 2 more to go. I am excited. This has been a fun series to do, and I can't wait to get to my top 10. In the meantime, let me know what you think of the games on this list. Which have you played, and which do you want to play? And don't worry, I'm ready for the Star Wars comments.
I'm not afraid.
And until next time, let's get another round for the table.